Bravely Defaults 2. Hey everybody, welcome back for another game break. So, Bravely Default 2, it's going to be an interesting game to review because it's a game I covered quite a bit before its release because I was very excited for it. It was one of my most anticipated games of the year. And if you were to ask me if I would recommend this game to everybody, I'd say definitely not. I wouldn't even recommend it to RPG fans at large either. This game was made for a very specific type of gamer, very specific type of RPG lover. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. I would just be very cautious because this game is very much a classic throwback in a lot of its systems, and it does have some things missing that I think a lot of gamers today would miss, and I don't think would maybe necessarily be a good time for them because of it, and I'll get into that later. But all in all, I did still really enjoy my time with this game, and I guess something needs to be said for just being really excited for a game in general and having the right mindset going into it. And that's very much what I had. I pretty much thought that I would enjoy this game immensely before I even started, and I by and large did. I didn't really have a bad time playing this game. Sure, there were things that popped up that would annoy me or things that I think they could have done better, but all in all, I enjoyed 99% of this game, I would say, by and large. And it is a grind fest. There's pretty much no way to avoid that. There are some systems in place that do mitigate that to a degree, but it is still there. And it was a long game too. Took me about 75 hours to finish the entire game, but I did virtually all the side quests, pretty much everything I could do in that game, and I fought virtually every enemy I would come across because there's no random encounters in this game. So, and I was over leveled too. So having said all of that, let's get into Bravely Default 2, what I think about it, what it does great, because it does some things amazingly well, and the things it didn't do quite so good. So let's get to it. Visuals. Bravely Default 2's visuals is easily, without question, one of the things it does best. Virtually everything. So the environments look amazing, both when you're out in the open world, the world map looks great. In battle, environments look great. The monster designs in battle look fantastic, excellently done. Loved seeing every new monster variety I would encounter. The cities look great. You're essentially walking through a painting, and there's even a panoramic view where you can zoom out and get the whole picture in all of its splendor. So cities look great. Job designs look amazing. All the jobs look good generally. There's a couple where I'm not a huge fan of, just maybe for, I don't know, not even visual reasons, just they just don't do anything for me as a concept. But generally, in terms of visuals, they all look pretty damn good. Spell effects, special moves all look good. The graphics are so good, even when I would just get new weapons in this game, I would immediately go, even if I didn't have a class, let's say currently using a spear weapon, I would still buy the spear weapons in the shop, not only because I would probably need them later, because I just wanted to see how everything looked. Because all the weapons look so cool and are so well designed and have great color, I would just look at them constantly. Man, they knocked it out of the park with how good this game looks. And even the bobblehead style that the characters have in this game, it's something that was maybe a little jarring at first, but I got used to it very quickly. I became very used to it, and I even started to like it as the game went on. And then the other thing with the visuals in this game is there's actually proper cutscenes in this game now, because I don't think we really had them very much in the past two Bravely Default games, but in this game we do get some, and they really help hit home those epic story moments where there's a lot of action and there's some dramatic moments going down, so it really helps in that regard. So all in all, visuals had pretty much zero goddamn problem with them the whole game. A lot of Bravely Default 2's problems stem from game design decisions. But the core thing, the turn-based combat, the Brave and Default system is great. Loved it. Honestly, if turn-based combat was a woman, I would marry you on the spot, and man, did I miss you. It was just something I was absolutely craving before I played this game, and it just made my enjoyment, or my level of enjoyment, that much higher, because it was just something I was really, really killing to do. But no, so game design, this is where Bravely Default 2 kind of goes wrong, and it kind of blows my mind what they do with some things. So dungeons, for example, they're not super complicated, they're very straightforward, they're quite basic for a lot of the game. But the thing that they don't do, for the dungeons is there is no mini map. And I'm sure some of you are maybe thinking, oh, but the dungeons aren't that complicated. We don't really need a mini map. Well, some of the later ones in the game do get a little bit more complicated, and it's still no excuse just because they're not. Because if you're anything like me, sometimes you have to step away for a minute. Or maybe you'll get in quite a few fights in a very small area and you'll be stuck in combat for a while and you'll just maybe lose track of where you are. And it would be nice to just have the option of a mini map that you could toggle on or off like you can in the world map, just to get your bearings a little bit. So you're not backtracking and losing track of where you are. Very much they only give you a marker indicating where the main quest point or the side quest point is, but you don't have a map to really track it. It just kind of goes around the screen. So that was a baffling design decision. It very much seemed like addition via subtraction. They knew the dungeons weren't super complicated, so what they did was they took away the mini-map to make them more complicated for you. And I just don't think that's a good decision from a design standpoint. I really don't. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, where in the hell was the quest log? So all the quests in this game are numbered, so therefore I immediately assumed that there would be some kind of quest log so I could keep track of them. To see maybe if I missed quest 10 somewhere back down the road, and maybe I'm on quest 40, so I'd have generally a marker of whereabouts quest 10 could possibly be located in a certain area of the world, but we can't even do that. Yes, we could write it down on a piece of paper, but we're kind of past that. Yes, I know we're going old school, but that's the kind of thing that people don't really, I think by and large, don't miss. It's the turn-based combat, the style of combat, not having to write stuff down. Maybe that's just me, but I think that was another weird thing to just have missing from the game. As quest logs are so common nowadays, as are mini-maps. And another thing, this is just a tip for all of you. You will collect monster parts in this game. So certain enemies will drop maybe gems or claws or teeth or wings, etc., etc. And for about 70 hours of the game, I was just waiting for this mechanic to pop up where I would maybe give these to a blacksmith and construct weapons, or maybe a job class down the road would be using these in combat somehow. Not the case. They are only meant to be sold, so just sell them. At no point in the game do they tell you that, oh, these items are just meant to be sold to shopkeepers. If it did happen some point in the game, totally missed it, and I had to look it up, and when I was looking it up, people had the same exact question, so I wasn't the only one that missed it. So if you get these monster parts, just sell them for cash. It will save you some grinding time. And then the last thing, and this is something that really became apparent as the game went on, is loadouts. Because of the amount of jobs and the different variety of equipment you have, we needed loadouts so bad in this game. Because I was almost dreading going into boss fights, or knowing that I would have to be switching my equipment soon, because it's like, oh man, I have to change my loadout, figure out what weapons and armor I had equipped to the character. I might have to change my accessories, and then also abilities as well. Because very much, if you're anything like me, you're gonna have very specific abilities you use when you're just fighting regular mobs, and then you're gonna have very specific abilities you use when fighting bosses. And a loadout would have just saved so much goddamn time. And it was easily one of my biggest irritants with the game, so I really hope next time they just have a loadout system of some kind. Even if it's only for a handful of loadouts, would have saved me so much trouble, because you get so many abilities. I don't know, maybe if you're anything like me, I was just losing track of which abilities I was using, which abilities I had figured were the best for my character, because there's quite a few that are viable, so it was just another missed opportunity, I think. But that's not to say all the game design decisions in this game were bad by any means. For example, in dungeons, there's little portals you can go to that will zip you to the other end or in the middle of the dungeon. So that saves you a lot of time if you're backtracking for quests and stuff like that. So I loved that. There's an auto heal feature in the menu if you need to heal up really quick. That's great too. And there's also the ship quest minigame where you can send a ship out into the open world, and it will collect items for you while the game is on sleep mode. I love being rewarded for not playing, because obviously we all can't play 24/7. So it's nice to come back and have that little bit of a reward waiting for you. Love that. I hope they keep doing that for every Bravely Default game. I also love just exploring the world map for treasures. I always thought that was really cool. It just gave me that little bit more encouragement of just seeking out every little corner of the world. So awesomely done. And another thing that I wish they would have added to this game, and a lot of other games have it too, a couple of things actually. One was you can fast forward in battle, which is awesome. Saves grinding. Would have loved a fast forward feature outside of battle too, because there is quite a bit of backtracking, especially when it comes to side quests and stuff like that. And there can be a grind sometimes, so that would have just expedited the grind that little bit more. And the other thing is there's a theater mode in this game, so you can replay cutscenes. That's great. But once again, my mind can wander sometimes because I guess maybe as being a bit of a critic, I'm constantly thinking about things in the game, and sometimes, or just things not even about the game even, and my mind will wander. And I'll miss a couple of lines, and it would have been nice to have just a chat log or a dialogue log in order to quickly hit a button, because the Legend of Heroes games has that, for example, where you go back and be like, oh, those are the 2 lines of dialogue I missed, everything makes sense. And it takes a matter of seconds instead of having to replay a whole scene in theater mode. Something else I would have added. One thing this game did nail, though, was difficulty, especially when it came to the boss battles. And don't be like me, because I got cocky for a couple of them, and I was going in with half-level jobs, and I wasn't properly equipped in some cases, and I didn't have maybe a designated tank or healer, for example. You are asking for a world of trouble if you do that. Do not underestimate the bosses in this game, especially as the game starts picking up some steam. You're very much going to have need of a designated tank, healer, and a couple of DPSs by and large most of the time. So that's something I really like about this game. And random encounters were difficult up to a certain point. Yes, I could have upped it to maybe the more difficult mode or whatever, but generally you're going to get so many jobs with so many good abilities, you're going to be able to figure out ways to really stomp random encounters quite quickly. So I think that's maybe just a matter of people learning how to use the system properly, maybe not a fault of the game itself, but it is something I will mention. I was just rolling through random encounters eventually, but bosses were always quite difficult and very enjoyable. And I need to mention the job system a little bit more because I just love the job system in Bravely Default games. I love having a main job and a sub job and all the different things you can do and all the different equipment you can have for classes that typically don't use it. For example, Adele at one point, I had her as a knight class, but I had her fighting as a martial artist. And I don't know about you, but I was just loving every second of her in full plate mail armor, doing essentially chi blasts or flaming jump kicks, just fighting like a martial artist, but equipped like a knight. I just love things like that. Just a little bit of a fantasy playland thing going on, and I just found it super enjoyable. So the job system is one of this game's biggest strengths, and loved it. And very much later on in the game, I don't want to spoil anything, but as you get to the very end of the game, you're going to be encountering some very difficult optional boss battles. Some of you know what I'm talking about when I say this, and I've only managed to defeat one of these encounters so far, and the other ones have just stomped me into the ground. I thought I had a good handle on the jobs I had and the abilities and whatnot, but oh man, I'm getting worked. So very much so when it comes to late game, you are going to need to maybe play with the different jobs and the abilities you're using and mixing matching jobs differently, because you are going to need to come up with some different strategies for these really hard encounters later on. But that's a good thing. You have some difficult elements in the game there for you if it's something you want to tackle, and you don't have to if you don't want to. And then the last thing I'll talk about from a game design perspective is just the side quests. The side quests, by and large, are nothing to write home about. They're very standard fare. They're fetch quests, or they're talk to this NPC, or they're go out and kill these mobs, or whatever. So that's by and large what I was expecting, though, so it didn't really rub me the wrong way by any means. And some of these, though, I will give credit where credit's due, is they do flesh out side characters and just lore bits of the greater world in general. So those I really enjoyed when I was getting more story moments and more character moments. So those side quests were good. I liked that. But even though some of them are typical fetch quests and whatever, there was one I had to go back and forth across town from one far end of the town to the other 5 times, just talking to a couple of NPCs, and you encounter that kind of thing, and it's just obviously that's padding. I get fetch quests, I get killing mobs, but it's like, do we need to pad with this kind of quest? You're obviously just making me kill time here, but that was far and in between. That was just one example where I was just like, ugh. But anyway, moving on. Now for the game's story. So Bravely Default 2, very much I got what I expected. A classic tale of 4 elemental crystals with a mysterious big evil bad that we needed to vanquish. And that's pretty much what we got. But there were some really good parts about the story. The characters, for example, the main 4 heroes. So we have Elvis, the coolest guy with a chin strap beard. I know. My brother-in-law might fit in that category too. But Elvis is pretty damn dope, and I just love his whole traveling to new locations, loving trying good food and new drinks and stuff like that. Very much a man after my own heart. And then his partner Adele, who is just, sassy, badass girl with a good personality, very fun-loving, and her and Elvis's dynamic is just awesome to watch. They have some really heartwarming scenes. They just really vibe well off one another, so I was always enjoying seeing the two of them interact and just them interact with anyone else in general. Then the other two protagonists, so we have Seth and Gloria, so the main hero and the main heroine, they were okay. They were very vanilla. The side characters, I feel, are the ones you were very much supposed to really like. Whereas you're maybe supposed to inject yourself a little bit more in the vanilla protagonists. Don't get me wrong, didn't hate them. They were okay. Didn't find them annoying, which is a huge plus. And when it came to the game's villains, generally all the asterisk holders you encountered to acquire new jobs, some were better than others. Some I found quite interesting, and some of them got quite a bit more development, and then others were very throwaway, kind of whatever. The villains were very average fare in this entire game. There are by no means any Kefkas or Luca Blights in this entire experience. And while it was a very classic JRPG tale or a very classic tale of crystals, there were a lot of genuine story surprises in the game. There were quite a few moments where I was very much flabbergasted what was going on, and there was a lot of good subversion in the game too. There was enough surprises and good character moments between the protagonists or side stories involving the game's villains to help keep the game afloat and interesting. I wasn't finding myself bored to tears at all throughout the entire game. At some points, I was maybe more interested than others, but there were generally always things going on that would pique my interest and keep me engaged. So I will give that to Bravely Default 2. Don't get me wrong, there are better stories out there for sure, but there is enough to keep this game afloat. For a quick example, there is very much at one point in the game, almost like a Spanish Inquisition type incident happening. There's a lot of religious zealotry going on. We have people being pressured into committing suicide. There definitely are some darker themes in this game, and I really like that when it has that deceptive candy coating that the graphics have. Everything looks like bright and cheery. But then we get these darker themes in there as well. So I always like that too. And something else I will mention, because this is a deal breaker for a lot of people, and this is something that really annoys me if it's not the case, is this game does have a satisfying conclusion. I was very much satisfied with how things wrapped up overall. So there is that to look forward to. You're not going to be going through this long experience and get a totally garbage conclusion. So just a friendly heads up. And a quick note on the game's audio. So the English voices, yikes, switched immediately over to the Japanese VA and didn't even look back. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And the soundtrack for this game overall was quite good. It was an interesting experience for me though, because walking away from the game, I very much had the feeling that the soundtrack was just okay. And it wasn't until I sat down and I started doing editing for this review and started listening to individual tracks again and picking out specific tracks for this video that I started to appreciate it more. And it reminded me of how much I appreciated the soundtrack at the very beginning of the game. It's just everything kind of wore on me after a little while after playing the game for so long. But generally, the soundtrack was quite good. It has some very good pieces both in and outside of battle. And some of the asterisk user themes in particular are incredible to listen to. So overall, the soundtrack I was quite pleased with. Even though this game was a mixed bag, it's still one I really enjoyed. And it was a game I was really looking forward to once again. I was craving a classic tale of crystals and the job system and that sweet turn-based combat. And I got all that, so I really enjoyed the game because of it. But obviously where it lags behind a bit and where some of the enjoyment is hampered is just some of the design decisions, which I've already mentioned, that were just bafflingly omitted. And the story by and large, it had enough surprises and good character moments to keep it afloat, with some interesting themes. So if you are looking for a classic JRPG that may be a little bit grindy and maybe is missing some systems, but if you know you love that turn-based combat and you want a decent story, some cool characters, at least a couple of cool characters, and that sweet job system, then I would say give this game a try. But if you're looking for a RPG-defining experience or a genre-changing experience, I'd say probably pass this game. You obviously all know yourselves best, and you're gonna know if this type of game is for you based off what I've said or not. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But Bravely Default 2, I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are there things about the game that you really enjoyed that I didn't? Are there things that you really didn't enjoy that I missed? Let me know, and I'll see you next time for another Game Break.